What if I told you that your grandmother's garden once held secrets more powerful than modern medicine? Calendula for memory, sage for grief, garlic for protection, remedies passed down through generations, and then, suddenly, erased, vanished from pharmacies, banned by law. Why? Because some say they work too well. In 1963, a hidden document surfaced, a list of unregulated treatments said to weaken pharmaceutical influence. That list? It matched her grandma's recipe book. One woman tried a calendula poultice in 2024. Her pain vanished, but so did her memories. And that was just the beginning. Now her granddaughter, a journalist, is digging deeper, and what she's finding could change everything we know about healing, or destroy her mind in the process. Ancient cures, modern consequences. You ready for what comes next? Hit like, subscribe, and let's go. Today, we trust pills more than plants, and hospitals more than home remedies. In our modern world, sterile, digitized, regulated, the idea of using wild herbs to treat illness feels almost primitive. Science, they tell us, has advanced beyond superstition. Artificial intelligence monitors our vitals. Algorithms predict diseases before symptoms appear. Pharmacies offer a pill for everything: sleep, memory, sadness, silence. But for all our progress, something feels broken. Rates of chronic illness are rising. Side effects stack like dominoes. And beneath the polished surface of modern medicine lies a truth most don't dare question. Why did the old ways disappear? You see, just a century ago, every village had a healer, someone who knew which root calmed the heart, which flower chased fevers. These weren't myths, they were methods. Passed down, whispered, recorded in stained notebooks, lost in attic boxes. But sometime in the mid-20th century, those notes began to vanish. Quietly, without explanation. Laws changed. Labels warned. Certain herbs were quietly declared unsafe, not because they were proven harmful, but because no one could explain how they worked. In our quest to control nature, we stopped listening to it. And the knowledge, fragile, ancestral, powerful, was buried. Or worse, erased. Now, in 2025, as the world faces antibiotic resistance, pharmaceutical monopolies, and growing mistrust in healthcare, people are beginning to look back, to wonder, what did our ancestors know that we've forgotten, or were made to forget? This story isn't just about herbs. It's about memory, silence, and a woman who opened the wrong notebook and found something no one was supposed to read. It began, as most dangerous things do, in silence. In the early 1900s, nestled deep in the Appalachian Mountains, a woman named May Whitlock was known only by whispers. The Green Widow, they called her. No one really knew where she came from, but they knew what she could do. People with infections that wouldn't heal, children burning with fever, men coughing blood, they came to her when doctors gave up. She never asked for money. She asked for silence. Her remedies were simple: calendula steeped in vinegar, crushed wormwood under the tongue, boiled sage in cloth wraps. But the results were terrifying. Wounds closed overnight. Fevers vanished by dawn. People walked home who weren't supposed to walk again. Some said she made deals with spirits. Others believed she was part of something older, a lineage of women who carried knowledge never meant to be written, only spoken, and only to those who would listen. In 1937, a government health inspector visited her town. He never left. Days later, federal agents burned her cabin to the ground. All that remained was a scorched root cellar and fragments of handwritten notes, smudged in ash. For decades, May's name was erased from public records, but in certain herbal circles, her book of quiet medicines lived on, photocopied in secret, passed like contraband. And here's where it gets darker. Every person who studied her full list of recipes either disappeared, went blind, or died by unexplained illness. Not instantly, but slowly, as if the knowledge itself carried a cost. Now, almost a century later, May's final notebook has resurfaced, in the hands of a woman who doesn't believe in curses. Yet, her name was Rachel, a 32-year-old freelance journalist from Asheville who'd grown up hearing stories about the woman in the woods from her grandmother, bedtime tales she once dismissed as mountain folklore. But in 2024, while sorting through boxes after her grandmother's funeral, she found something that didn't feel like a story at all. Tucked behind a false panel in an old armoire was a small leather-bound book. No title, just a wax seal in the shape of a 4-petal flower. Inside, formulas. Strange ones. calendula wrapped in sheep's wool and buried overnight, garlic soaked in moon water and applied exactly at midnight. Plants she recognized, but in combinations and rituals that felt unnatural. At first, Rachel was skeptical, but after years of chronic migraines, she tried the simplest recipe, a calendula compress steeped in apple cider vinegar and bound with red thread. The pain was gone in less than an hour. No side effects, no fatigue, just silence, relief. But the next day, she forgot her best friend's name. By the end of the week, she couldn't recall where she parked her car. A scan showed nothing. Doctors were baffled. But Rachel kept going, digging into old herbal archives, rural newspaper clippings, interviewing forgotten healers. And what she found chilled her to the bone. From 1952 to 1964, over 120 plants were quietly removed from the U.S. medical pharmacopoeia. Not because they were proven harmful, but because they were incompatible with modern treatment pathways. Polite language for something darker. One government memo, half-burnt, read, "Control begins with memory, and memory begins with what we allow them to heal." The deeper Rachel went, the more she forgot. Places, names, time, and the notebook. It felt heavier each night, as if it didn't want to be read anymore. It wasn't just the herbs. That's what Rachel realized one night at 3:12 a.m. Awake, sweating, staring at the open notebook as pages fluttered on their own. The instructions weren't just about ingredients. They were about timing, symbols, intention, and frequency. Each recipe had a rhythm, a specific hour, day, phase of the moon. Some even referenced emotional resonance, the state of the healer's mind during preparation. It sounded absurd until she discovered a declassified 1981 study buried in a defunct NIH archive. The report analyzed the electromagnetic signatures of common plants. Calendula, for instance, emitted a fluctuating low-frequency wave, harmless on its own. But when combined with sage and bound in natural wool, it formed a unique harmonic pattern, one that interfered subtly with human neural oscillations. In short, it could influence memory pathways, not chemically, but vibrationally. That's why the effects couldn't be detected on scans. That's why the side effects seemed psychological. The body healed, but something else shifted. A neuroscientist interviewed in the report wrote, "If this is real, we're not just talking about medicine. We're talking about a technology we don't understand, embedded in plants older than civilization." Rachel's notes grew frantic after this. Her handwriting changed, like someone else was writing. And then came the most disturbing part. A photo, tucked in the back of the notebook. Faded, burned at the edges. It showed May Whitlock, standing in front of a black circle painted on stone. Behind her, a group of men in suits, faces scratched out in ink. On the back of the photo, a single sentence: "They came for the knowledge." But it took something from them, too. So now we ask, was it ever just about healing? In 2025, we have satellites mapping the molecular structure of clouds, AI that deciphers genetic code in minutes, and quantum computers predicting the behavior of atoms. Yet when it comes to traditional herbal medicine, the kind passed from mouth to ear, generation to generation, modern science still shrugs. Or worse, silences. But something is changing. Quietly. In the underground circles of biohacking forums and fringe medical conferences, whispers have returned. Whispers of resonant botanics, of neurofrequency fields encoded within plant life. At MIT, a small research group has been experimenting with vibrational signatures in natural compounds. Not just what a plant does chemically, but how its frequency interacts with brainwaves. One researcher, speaking off record, admitted, "Some of these patterns, they're intelligent, responsive, as if the plants remember things." Meanwhile, a leaked patent from a European biotech firm described a machine that can decode the harmonic alignment of non-processed organic material, language eerily similar to what May Whitlock wrote by hand in 1928. Even NASA, yes, NASA, filed a research brief last year noting that certain wild herbs exposed to lunar cycles display anomalous magnetic behavior. Coincidence? Or evidence of an ancient intelligence we've ignored for too long? Strangely, none of this has made mainstream headlines. When Rachel tried to publish her findings, 3 outlets declined. One warned her to drop it before it drops you. But why the secrecy, if it's all just folklore? Why does every attempt to understand these plants feel like stepping into a locked room, with no windows and something breathing behind the walls? The deeper science digs, the more it starts to sound like myth. Or maybe myth was always just misunderstood science, the kind we were never meant to rediscover. Some say May Whitlock was a healer. Others say she was a gatekeeper, not of cures, but of boundaries we were never meant to cross. The more Rachel uncovered, the more conflicting the stories became. One theory, echoed in a 1976 banned pharmacology paper, claims May's remedies worked because they disrupted consensus reality, not just healing the body, but altering the perception of pain, time, even self. That's why patients forgot, why hallucinations followed successful treatments. Another theory suggests the recipes acted like biological code, unlocking dormant sequences in human DNA, remnants of an older version of humanity, now incompatible with the modern world. But here's the darker side. A third theory, whispered among rogue researchers, proposes that the plants themselves aren't passive, that they select who gets healed and who gets erased, that they remember, and that May's real gift wasn't the knowledge, but the ability to negotiate with what lived beneath the roots. Rachel's own descent wasn't sudden, it was gradual. Each use of a recipe brought healing followed by disorientation, deeper understanding followed by dreams of May's cabin, even though she'd never seen it. One night, she woke up writing in a dialect she didn't know. The final pages of her journal tremble with desperation. It's not the recipes. It's the attention. Something watches when you open the book. And once it sees you, it doesn't forget. Perhaps science tried to bury these practices not out of ignorance, but fear. Because if the old ways are real, then modern medicine is incomplete. Or worse, it's a cage designed to keep us from touching something ancient, powerful, and very much alive. So now the question is, would you risk healing if it meant losing who you are? After Rachel's final entry, she vanished. No trace, not in Asheville, not in digital records, not in hospital systems. Her apartment was left untouched, except for the notebook, placed neatly on the kitchen table, pages open to a recipe involving valerian, black salt, and a phrase written in ink that refused to fade. Since then, strange patterns have emerged. Online forums report cases of people using long-forgotten remedies with uncanny effects, terminal patients recovering, scars disappearing overnight, followed by episodes of memory loss, dissociation, or voices whispering in empty rooms. Environmental sensors have begun picking up low-frequency fluctuations near old herbal growth sites once labeled cursed ground by locals. Scientists at independent labs confirm something's affecting the magnetic field, but only where certain plants grow together in specific alignments. It's as if the Earth itself is remembering something it once taught us, and we chose to forget. Governments stay silent. Pharmaceutical lobbies deny all claims. But people are noticing, and some are listening. There are rumors now of communities retreating into remote forests, living by May's rules, growing only what the notebook described. They're not off-grid, they're off-reality. A new evolution, not biological, but perceptual, may already be underway. Those who touch the knowledge begin to see differently. Not just light and shape, but intent, emotion, origin, and perhaps consequence. The greatest threat now isn't the plants, or even the recipes, it's the divide between those who cling to the synthetic and those who remember the soil. Because once enough people remember, the world as we know it could fracture. Not with war, not with fire, but with a question whispered in the dark. What if the cure was never meant for all of us? We stand at a crossroads, not just of medicine, but of memory. What Rachel found wasn't just a forgotten notebook, it was a mirror. A reflection of what humanity once was: intuitive, connected, reverent to the unseen rhythms of life. But in our hunger for control, for predictability, we traded wisdom for convenience. Pills replaced plants. Data replaced instinct. Healing became a transaction instead of a relationship. And now, the knowledge is returning, not as folklore, but as a question, a choice. Do we dare listen to the old ways, knowing they demand something deeper than belief? Something personal, irreversible? Or do we cling to the fluorescent safety of synthetic solutions, even as more people fall sick, more treatments fail, more lives feel empty and disconnected? This is not a story about herbs. It's a story about what happens when we silence the voices that carried us through centuries. It's about whether we trust a system that profits from our dependence or a memory that survived despite being buried, burned, and banned. Rachel made her choice. She followed the thread. She paid the price. But she also uncovered a truth we can't ignore anymore, that healing is not just a process, it's a path. One that may lead us back to something older than science and more sacred than comfort. So now the question falls to us, not as patients, but as people. Will we reclaim what was lost, or was it hidden for a reason? And if the cure changes you, if it takes more than it gives, would you still take it? Would you still open the book? Remember the calendula? The one Rachel used for her headache? The one that took away her pain and her memories? What if I told you that exact plant is probably growing in someone's backyard right now? Maybe even yours. It looks harmless. Bright yellow petals, soft scent, innocent. But after everything we've seen, do you still think it's just a flower? See, the scariest part of this story isn't the notebook. It's the idea that something so powerful, so ancient, was right in front of us all along, hidden in plain sight. And we were taught to ignore it. That's what keeps me up some nights. Not ghosts or conspiracies, but the thought that we lost something real. That maybe healing was never supposed to come in plastic bottles. Maybe it came with dirt under your nails, whispered instructions, and trust. And we broke that trust. Now we're left wondering, what else did we throw away because it didn't fit the system? What else could we still lose just because we're too afraid to remember? Maybe you think this is just a story, that Rachel never existed, that May Whitlock was just a name. But before you decide, ask yourself, why do so many people have the same dreams of cabins in the woods, of pages turning on their own, of a voice saying, take only what you're ready to give? So I'm asking you, honestly, would you read the book if it was in front of you? Or would you burn it? Let me know in the comments. I really want to hear your answer. Because if you've listened this far, something already awakened in you. Hit like, subscribe, and tell me, what would you be willing to forget to finally be healed?